Okay, welcome to this planning commission meeting, Thursday, August 24th. Happy summer, everybody.
Yes.
May I have a motion well, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Boy, I'm out of practice here. I'm going to call the meeting to order. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Will you call the roll, Emily?
Commissioner Matusik,
Yes.
Commissioner Farrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Okay, moving to the consideration of the minutes from our June 22nd, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any amendments to those minutes? Minutes, everything looks good. May I have a motion to approve those minutes then?
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, new discussion. Emily, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik,
Yes.
Commissioner Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Okay. That's how we roll every night, just like that.
At this pace, we'll be out of here by what? 6:50?
Oh, I don't even want to know.
Times.
Okay, moving to our dark sky initiative. Let's talk about that. So I looked through what we were sent, and I don't have any formal notes on that in terms of talking point. Do you want me to read the background, or
I can,
you want to read the background?
if you want,
Yeah, why not?
I can let you know just why we're here. I know everyone's time is valuable. And so I appreciate everyone coming in. It's staff's understanding that the Council and Plan Commission had originally worked on some dark sky ordinances several years ago. There were some amendments. We've provided you guys with a couple of sections of the ordinance that deal with the design review, as well as general lighting requirements that have come of that. And I guess there were some amendments in 2017. Is our understanding that the council had done some work sessions and had indicated that they might like to have a little bit more information on some of the dark sky, and just thought that it might be something that could be forwarded to the Plan Commission for review. I know that Dorian at that time had submitted some comments to the council indicating some concerns or recommendations that he might have, and some of those are indicated in the report, just as far as like it's restricting exterior lights on say, for example, timing, some of the larger structures like hotels and things like that. So I think what pretty much what we've come to find out is, I'm sure you guys all are aware of this, but a lot of the light pollution is basically caused by the unshielded or excessive light fixtures, unnecessary or redundant lighting. People have too much out. Misaimed fixtures where you might see light trespassing from your property onto others. Fixtures that are located in bad areas, leading to glare, leading to the light trespass, and then the timing and the sensors and things like that that could be used. So a lot of time it's misdirected, unshielded, excessive, and unnecessary. So some of the things that could be done to maybe improve these types of situations could be to use more shields. And I'm assuming that maybe that was some of the things that were amended as part of some of the codes, because in the general section, it does talk about having shielded lightings. There's a lot of discussions on lumens compared to watts, and some of the lumens compared to watts, I guess lumen measurement is like 1 lumen would be equal to like one candle on a cake. That's approximately what a lumen is. But some of the numbers are real odd in some of the sections. Like, for example, it says 1,260 lumens for lights at a front door. Well, 1,260 lumens equals 88 watts. So it's kind of just odd because I don't know of an 88-watt light bulb. I'm not sure if you guys do or not, but there could be some tweaks in terms of some of the numbers. I don't know. But really what it comes down to is some of the things we're looking at is, the shielding, like I said, that's in there. How do we protect or use areas in where there's pedestrians and traffic, and how do we make sure that, safety is involved in that, but not doing too much, mounting fixtures at the right height. And oftentimes, I'm sure you guys have seen this with car lights and things like that, the LEDs and the blues compared to the softer, warm lighting that sometimes isn't quite as bright. So those were just a couple of things that staff has seen that we might want to consider in terms of researching. I don't know that it was more just a discussion. The council had suggested this. We just wanted to bring a little bit of information, just have a general discussion. Obviously, we have the code update, so it would be an ideal time to potentially look at maybe some areas that we could consider tweaking. Not to say that we have to create a group or something, not saying we don't need to, but maybe there's just some simple things that we might be able to find to make things better. So I guess that was just going to be a little bit of a discussion from staff leading into this, and just putting it out to the Plan Commission just for comments, and not looking to extend and have a super long meeting. I think we can come back and do some more research. But it was just a general task that I think the council just wanted Plan Commission to just provide some feedback on.
Sure, that's helpful. Thank you. Comments?
I think talking to the community here, amber lighting is a really important one. Realizing that you can have the same watts blue as you just mentioned, Steve, or yellow, and that the community would really prefer that we focus on the type of light as much as the watts and lumens.
Mhm.
And then really focusing on shielding not being just partial, but complete. So let's, just tighten it. It doesn't take much, but that would be a nice way to tighten it. Also making sure that we're thinking about the height of the light. So looking at the international, Dark Sky Association, their model code, they really talk a lot about what's the purpose. So if the purpose is lighting what's down at your feet, there should be some kind of clear and objective standard for, no higher than 4 feet if you're lighting a walkway. If you're next to a front door, it should only be the height of the doorway or whatever it is, but we could probably tighten up some standards around height, because it's the height of the light often really influences how much is making it to the sky. Yeah. So those were some initial thoughts. I do feel as though someone said there's been some conversations with some short-term or maybe rental management companies around safety concerns. So it used to be that I think the city tried to say, you need to turn off the light after a certain amount of time, which is what the International Dark Sky Association recommends. So, that would be the gold standard, 15 minutes and then off, time to get into the door, time to get by your garage. But I think there may have been a conversation with some of the rental companies. They had a concern and they wanted to have lights outside of rentals at all times. And I think that might be worth a conversation.
So I'm like, as a hotelier here,
Mhm.
just right at the street, that's a significant concern.
Okay.
We have guests coming literally all hours of the night, coming and going. So I think, like you said, gold standard with midnight, 11 o'clock, whatever time is great in an ideal world. But in terms of like the liability for public safety and the ability for people to get into and out of either their homes or whatever it is kind of like a balancing act we have to look at with this. And I think going with the lights that are purposeful, making sure that if the intention of the light is to light the pathway, that's what the light is lighting. It's not lighting. It's not, and I see it on a lot of houses where you've got 2 lights on either side of the garage door that are on all day long, all the time, all night long. And they're either partially shielded or completely unshielded. And it's just the bright, big, huge lights that are not serving the purpose, their intended purpose.
Right.
And so they're not contributing to the safety of the person being able to get in and out of the door, get in and out of their driveway, whatever it is. But I don't think saying everyone has to have all lights off midnight or 11 o'clock or whatever would serve to benefit the overall safety of the community.
So
Well-
is there, oh, go ahead. I'm gonna let Aaron talk.
Well, in terms, I mean, commercial zone where hotels are located is one thing, but a residential zone is an entirely different thing. And there's just no reason that any residential unit would need a light on 24 hours a day. And I'm not sure if that's what you're saying, Eric, but
No, I wasn't saying that, but many of the vacation rentals are just in residential zones. Like
Right,
I live
so-
on Taft and I've got
sure.
Five.
And
rentals on my street.
well, and those 5 rentals should not be permitted to have lights on 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But Eric,
In my
here-
opinion, I mean, there's just no, I feel strongly about this, you know, living on the north end, I've got 2 neighbors that really affect me, and we're all very considerate and kind, and we turn the lights off always out of respect to each other at dark. And if it wasn't that way, I mean, which leads me to the next part of this is, Steve, how does enforcement look if we actually do nail down some language and a vacation rental has their lights on 24 hours a day and I complain? I mean, where will we get with enforcement? Because without it, it's again another irrelevant topic.
Right. I mean, that's a fair point. Administration is a whole aspect, part of, I guess you could say 3-legged stool, right? Maybe it's the regulation, it's the work with the property owner, and then it's the administration of the ordinance. So yeah, there's no question that that's something as far as a staff that we're going to have to be able to participate in and do the administration of it, should we have complaints. And that is something that, we have now, but it's an ongoing issue, in different parts of the city at different times. So yes, that's where we participate as well.
So in terms of enforcement, I had a conversation with Chief Schemmerhorn about how they enforce, because I was like, what exactly do you do if there's a complaint? And so they have a light meter that they can bring out and they can measure the light meter. All light meters measure in a unit called Lux, LUX, and it's a number of lumens that illuminate a 1 meter square spot. So it's a very specific type of measurement that our code doesn't mention, because it's not a light bulb's never measured in lux. It's either measured in watts or lumens, and all light bulbs now are measured in lumens. Like if you go to the store, it says on the back it's 2800 lumens or 100 lumens or whatever size bulb it is, and it's going to produce like 100 lumens from the spot. But if you're standing 10 feet away from it, you're going to get like 60 lux that you're going to pick up on a meter. And so if there's a confusion or a level of disconnect between what our code has, with lumens being the main thing that's focused on, which is the side that the consumer or the installer has control of. They know what that is. But there's no conversion for enforcement because light meters read in lux rather than lumens.
But you could do a standardized test.
Yeah, no,
Series of light bulbs, you could say,
create
we're always going to
yeah.
stand 4 feet from the source, and
Mhm.
that's what we're going to measure. And then enforcement would be able to say, I know this bulb with this lumens puts out this light. Therefore, here's
But there's more than just that. I mean, what about the homes that each light is at the correct lumens, but there's 6 of them?
I thought, isn't there a number of maximum
Yes,
per
lumens
square feet.
for the property?
Did the chief talk about how they would enforce that?
I didn't. It was a very short conversation about, because I was just really curious about how they're measuring it. Because I know they had mentioned at one point that they were having trouble enforcing lumosity violations just because they didn't know how to convert that thing, because our code doesn't have anything in it that specifies how to enforce that in the end.
Sounds like that clear and objective darn
Yes.
thing is coming around
Exactly.
again.
So I have a question. You had mentioned about, hotels needing safety, and whether people do come or go all night long is a whole other conversation, but how much light do you really need? So I live next to two hotels.
Mhm.
And they couldn't be more different in terms of how they light up at night. One, the entire front is lit up. If I were staying there, I would be pissed personally. The other hotel actually turns off most of their lights except for the entrance. There are a few lights. They're actually tastefully done. They're the amber lights. So, I mean, there has to be some guidance for hotels too, because the one hotel clearly thinks it's party time and the other hotel is like, oh, let's respect our guests and our neighbors.
Well, I would think that would be a discussion with the property, because in the end, I'm as a property owner, I don't want to be spending extra electricity and extra lighting and all that extra that comes with having that stuff anyways. And so maybe they're not necessarily aware that, hey, I'm being a jerk. Lighting up this whole
It's meant to be in our code, so there is not
Yeah.
this, relying on the goodness.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, and unfortunately, Public Works isn't here, but what's our utility company, Pacific Power? Pacific Power has changed their lighting, and if any of our streetlights goes, right now, most of our streetlights is that amber, old school lighting. Their new lighting is a harsh white, super harsh. And when I talked to the installer, he said that they're not given an option. That is now the new requirement. I know this firsthand because there was a street light on my street and they changed the bulb and all the neighbors had a hissy fit, and Karen stepped in and took care of it. But that's something we should consider too, because we do have street lights.
Well, and the streetlights are managed by the city, but owned by Pacific Power. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and the city has the authority to tell Pacific Power, hey, we want X, Y, Z.
But Pacific Power says that that's no longer what I was told, and I could, again, this was one individual, but that it's no longer an option. They no longer have ability to put in those amber lights. Sure, that's the wrong term, but.
I think with something like that, it's probably like a similar code that DPW has as far as specification. I'm just wondering offhand, if we do something, say, for example, different from their spec, we may have to say as a community, pay potentially an extra charge for a different type of bulb. I don't know that. I'm speculating that, but I'm wondering if they have a certain specification, and if you want something else, I'm sure that discussion could happen, and we could maybe also, besides like our zoning ordinance, because street lighting obviously comes into play with the glares and the glows and the different things like that, and the blue lights and, different things. So that's another option that we could at least speak to both the power company as well as to our staff to see what, if anything, could be done from that perspective as well.
That would be great.
And even if there was a colored screen, like if they have to put in a white bulb, but you could put a colored screen underneath it, that might be another solution. If there really is like
To filter out the
to
blue.
filter the blue, to basically say, okay, if you can't locate a bulb that is yellow for a street light, who knows? Then at least, some kind of screening that the city could install.
So on street lighting conversation, I brought it up in a couple months ago. Maybe it was over a year ago. COVID dates are all weird. But Gower Street, these lights that are out here, I was told that there was no other option but to have those by the city manager. Those the globe ones that are like literally the worst in terms of dark sky stuff. And I think if we're having a discussion about dark skies and that, especially if these are city owned lights, that we should put our money where our mouth is in terms of dark sky stuff and address this pretty glaringly obvious situation here with these bright blue globes that are literally shining lights straight up into the sky.
I think that's a fair point, because a lot of times we can start that effort.
Mhm.
Yeah,
By example.
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's something, again, I can at least bring up and have those discussions internally.
Yeah, they do sell a globe style that's shielded most of the way across the top with reflector, so most of the light goes down. So you don't lose the style if we want to stick with that style. If that's the consensus with the council or whoever's making that decision.
I
But
think sometimes the lights can even be stuck up further into some of those fixtures where, you know, it might be open, but I think the
Mhm.
bulb and emitting, you know,
the light emitters.
yeah, exactly. So
Rather than, and then also not having bright blue.
that's something I certainly can touch base with those guys on.
I just want to emphasize, I'm also a really, really big proponent of timing.
Mhm.
Again, I understand that hotels have safety and liability concerns. But for private homes, I mean, seriously, 24 hours or all night long. I mean, you're just asking for people to break into your house.
Oh, I get that a lot. This house right across the street from me is a vacation rental that I don't think those lights in front. I think they're on a timer that they turn on at 6 PM and turn off at 6 AM. And that's it. They're on anytime it's dark, and so our code, there are standards in here that are not currently being enforced. And I think that's a staffing and just an inability to address everything, but having unshielded lights is almost every single house
Yeah.
has unshielded lights, more than one unshielded light. And the requirement is for them to be timed or shielded.
And not that anyone cares, Eric, but if I lived in your neighborhood, I would have filed so many complaints with the city, and I'd probably already be at a nuisance action in county court to have them shut that down. I mean, that would drive me absolutely insane. I mean, I moved away from Portland for that reason.
Yeah.
Well, come drive by Tolovana some night. It's
You know, and I wonder if
experience
a
there.
fine or something to make this
Yeah,
enforcement
probably.
have some teeth.
But
Yes.
I want to bring up
Yes.
one thing before we talk about fines. And again, I'm not pointing fingers, but there's a house in Tolovana. I live in Tolovana, so my whole entire reference is Tolovana. There was a house that recently was remodeled. I went through and I saw that they did submit plans and everything was approved. I couldn't really see if the plans really had the 6 lights that I mentioned. But they were part of the entire construction. It wasn't like they were added after the fact. So either they somehow, the design committee didn't get to see them, or the design committee missed it, but whatever happened, now we're going to go and try and penalize people who perhaps thought they were doing the right thing by submitting their plans and getting them approved. So there's more nuance to the enforcement than just getting the police and the code officer involved.
Yeah, there was a recent project, a commercial project that was approved by DRB that I looked through the lighting plan, and after it had already been approved, and saw that all of the lights are all partially shielded lights that were fully out, and I'm anticipating those lights are going to be on at all hours regardless. So those would again be against our existing code that we have as it's written for lighting. So it was an education part that needs to filter back into the approval process from DRB and planning
Sure.
at that point as well.
And that's going to be on us too. So I can appreciate the comments and understand where you're coming from.
Les, you had your hand up. Do you still have a comment, or was it addressed?
Yeah. Well, thank you. The comment was really just kind of getting on board with Eric. Those city hall lights are terrible. We now have to keep our north facing window blinds closed at night because of those lights. So they're terrible. And we've had the same feedback from the city that I think Eric has maybe talked about. For whatever reason, there's nothing else that can be done, but clearly not good. We've been talking a lot about color. You know, now all of the commercially available, at least residential lights, are LED. In addition to lumens, there's also frequencies. And I wonder if we want to address acceptable frequency ranges as part of our code rewrite. Just a thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
No problem in terms of what the plan commission wants to do. Not by any means a lighting expert. So to make things, as easy for you as for us would be beneficial on our end as well.
Yeah. Okay. What do you guys think about taking a brief pause for public comment and then come back to our comment?
Yeah.
Just
sure.
realized we didn't know. why don't we open up for public comment? Is there anyone who'd like to bring forward any testimony?
Darrell Johnson, 4008 South Hemlock. So I came to the meeting on Monday with the two of the commissioners, and I expressed my desire to enforce dark skies here in Cannon Beach, and I don't think it really had been addressed very well. But a few years ago, when it came up at the Planning Commission meeting, I remember going through town at midnight and writing down, mainly these were hotels and motels, some short-term rentals, where they had their signs up and they had the lights on the ground pointing up at the sign. And I encouraged them on Monday to write a letter to these folks. And I actually told Daniel that our code enforcement person, that I would give him a list of the places that I spotted that had upward lighting. And so at some point, I'm going to have to go back and revise that. But I don't think there's anything that we could do other than persuade these people to put down. They could easily have the illumination on top of the post or on top of the sign pointing down. But the majority of the folks that having lights up were these hotels and motels. So listening to the discussion here, I think you're really on top of what we need to do. And once again, I think visiting neighbors that violate that is one way, but also very blatant, like it is with some of these places that I had listed. It's pretty clear that they have 100-watt or 150-watt bulbs that are pointing upward, and there's absolutely no need for that. So I just want to encourage you to keep working on this. The city will force some of these folks that are doing that. I mean, my feeling is if we can ban fireworks in Cannon, we can have dark skies. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public? Please come forward.
Siebert Warman, PO Box 778, Cannon Beach. I just really am thrilled that you guys are talking about this again. And I wanted to share something just years ago, when we lived on the other part of town near Sunset, that my husband found a baby puffin in a parking lot across from the Hallmark. And it was a different restaurant at that time. But what we were told was, and it was rescued, and the guys took it back out, and you know, it was trying to, you know how the little puffins, they try to go off the rock and go towards the sea, but when they've got all these lights, they get confused. And so this one was wandering around in the parking lot. Anyway, the birds, I think it's just so important because we do care about our birds here, that whatever we can do, we need to do it, because we thought years ago we solved this and we thought we were a dark sky city. And now we're finding out we're not a dark sky city per se, but I think the more we can do, the better. And I think I'm wondering if maybe it might behoove us to invite someone who does know all these terms as far as lumens and the frequencies and all that kind of thing, if they could come and speak to us, and we would have clarity for the staff as well as all of us. You guys, you know, I think whatever we can do, it's very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. Good idea to have someone speak to us. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Let me continue our conversation.
Yeah.
This is really helping me. I had to kind of get a baseline for the conversation. I've heard different things, and as I look through this, I get overwhelmed. Women's lax frequency. I'm like, right. This is going to be a long one.
I think we just need to simplify it.
Yeah, and make it clear.
Make it very clear and very simple. I mean,
seems to be a theme. I mean, it's just so important in the world we're in to just make it simple for people to understand. So it doesn't have the gray area we are so often faced with here.
So something that I've seen in the that's in here, I didn't see it in the code itself, but I saw it in some of the supplemental materials, like the watts to lumens conversion is like, looking at things like that. To me is something that's rather confusing because like if you look at an incandescent bulb or you look at a mercury bulb or you look at an LED bulb, they each take wattage is a unit of electricity. It's a unit of power that's being used by the particular illuminator. So it's either if it's a really efficient, so if it's one of those LEDs, a 10-watt LED produces 100 lumens versus it takes you like an 80-watt incandescent to get 80 lumens. So having the watts to lumens conversion thing in here, I think makes things, it kind of muddies the waters in terms of it's trying to establish clarity, but I feel like it muddies the waters because now with the different technologies that we have with LEDs and like most specifically LEDs, that they're programmable and you can get a brighter bulb.
That's right.
On significantly less power. And so it's not really relevant with more modern technology to have something like that in there. I feel like it makes things more mushy.
So
So
what
it'd be good. Oh,
go ahead.
that conversion chart is actually not on the city's website.
Okay, see, I keep finding it. I don't know where I know it's not in the code. I just.
It was attached to a packet that was sent to the counselors.
Okay, all right.
And when I sent my letters to the counselors, I said, this would have been helpful to have on the website for those of us who don't know how to translate.
Yeah.
But it's not actually there.
Okay, well, and most, like if you go and buy like any of the residential bulbs that you go and buy and most even fixtures, like you buy like the LED light fixtures and stuff, they say right on the package, this produces X number of lumens at 2200 degrees, or it'll tell you the temperature of the color. So it'll tell you what gradient it is for the color, and it'll tell you how many lumens that particular thing is that you're
That's
buying.
a really important point too. The temperature is really crucial because an LED with a warm temperature is much less jarring than one that's very bright.
Well, and
Cold.
the blue temperatures disrupt circadian rhythms. So it messes up both our circadian rhythm while we're driving home, trying to get home from work and go to bed, or the birds and the bugs. It messes up their sense because the blue is more representative of actual sunlight. And so it confuses sensors in your eye and then into your brain for mammals and everything across the spectrum.
And we wouldn't be opposed if someone comes up with, a chart that you think is very clean and easy. I mean, we'll look for one, but if you guys want to suggest anything, and we want to get it on the website, we're more than willing to, that's easy. So if we have something that's easy to understand, we'll put it out there.
Yeah, I think it could even be just reducing something like these tables.
Yeah,
here.
that very confusing.
It basically, if we made that simpler, this approach could work. And I do think education is critical, getting some information out about the effects on wildlife would be really, really helpful because people care about their neighbors, but not too much. But I don't think they can care a lot. Right. It's kind of like, yeah, that's fine. I won't irritate you. But if, you really say, hey, this is about the wildlife and explain those impacts, I think people get much more moved by it. I mean, I read just 2 articles on night sky and the impact on wildlife, and I was blown away, even though I thought I was already convinced.
The nocturnal aspect.
Yeah, just how amazing it is that the way we light the sky changes the entire ability for animals to navigate, to find food, as you say, to follow daily rhythms. So just getting some articles out into the community might be fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how, like say, for example, whether it's businesses or hotels, not to say, but any business, but, if we can show the economics, to like what you're talking about, hey, if you go this way, you're using less energy, not to say that economics, but that they see dollars that maybe helps them to be more convinced to do these types of things as well. And I don't know if you have any other suggestions in terms of whether it's the chamber or how else we could maybe, put stuff out to others, we need your help too,
Mhm.
you know? So anything that anyone has as far as ideas or suggestions, let's hear them.
So there's the wildlife aspect that, and being nice to your neighbors aspect and just being more pleasant that you don't have to deal with seeing those lights ridiculous. There's something I couldn't find the presentation. I attended a presentation 5 years ago, by Mary Coolidge, from Portland Audubon, it was at OMSI. It was a OMSI After Dark thing. It was pretty fun. It was all about dark skies. It was a whole hour and a half long presentation just about dark skies. And she had cited a number of studies that had been done about crime and lighting. And there have been studies done in Chicago and like Pittsburgh and somewhere else that I couldn't find the thing, so I couldn't find the exact cities that were studied in this, but proving that just because there is lighting does not reduce crime, and more thoughtful lighting, purposeful lighting is what actually deters that sort of stuff. So just because I feel like people get afraid. They're like, oh, I need to leave these lights on. That way people know, and deters crime. And that's not actually the case. It's a fallacy just because in our mind, because we think there's lots of lights, then it's good. And so I feel like education, so you have environmental education, you just don't want to deal with light education. And then it's not really helping crime education to go with all of that. And I tried for like this ever since the agenda was released for this to try to find that study, because I was like, I need to find these studies. I wanted to share it with everyone, but I could not find Mary's presentation. Really.
I saw something on that as well, and there was one picture that showed just like a light and someone coming in a yard,
Super glare.
and it was the glare, and you can see the person, and then when you turned it down, you could see the person who was there. So
Having more purposeful lighting.
right, yes,
And overall purposeful lighting. So like you said, if it's to light a path, lighting the path, not lighting the area around and the path that gets incidental light.
So what about existing lights? As you said, are residential lights, light the whole area. What do we do to the person who says, I've had this light since the house was built and you can't make me do it? Do we have ideas on the existing lights, or do we focus on that? Do we focus on?
We have to focus on.
We have to.
existing lights.
So that'd be the education side, I think.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
that's what we can.
Well, and I
there
feel like
is some
there's-
enforceable code here. So
Yeah,
to some extent, some of this would be taken care of by enforcement.
just by education and then enforcing what's already existing.
Yeah. And you could have a fade-in period.
is a big question, so whether or not, I don't know if there's, we might have to work with our attorneys or whomever to see if there's some type of sunset, or I don't know how, we could take care of that. Is it over time? But that's a big issue we have in the administration of some of this stuff.
Yeah. I could see pushback if, say, for example, my house was built in the 70s,
Did you find it?
then I could say, well, tell me what the code was in 1970 and I'll follow that. If I was really going to be a stinker about it. But
And that's what I was thinking when I can't remember your name. Daryl, yes. With Daryl's comments about the upward facing lights. So we currently at our hotel, we went through design review, went back in 2004. All of our stuff is approved. Our lighting plan is approved with upward facing lights. We're going to be changing our signs once we come up with a plan, and it has to go through design review. So it's going to be a whole process. When we do change it, it will be towards downward facing lights, but I don't know how long it's going to be before we finally get around to that. So currently what we're operating under is an approved lighting plan. It was approved by the city and then approved through design review board. Even though it's not good, that those specific lights are not great for, but we're like, it would be very expensive and very time consuming for us to change our existing situation. Our sign's getting to the point where it needs to be replaced real soon anyways, because it's mostly wood and starting to fall apart. And so when it gets replaced, it's going to be replaced with something that's conforming. Even if the code isn't changed to force it to be conforming, it's going to be conforming to a night a night sky approved light, that's gonna be great, but
And maybe.
if we get forced prematurely into that, that's gonna be a pretty significant hardship on us
Yeah,
to.
there'd be a lot.
But there's middle ground, right? So for instance, harping on the hotel down the street from me, I understand that changing all their fixtures would be a monumental expense,
Mhm.
but turning the lights off at midnight wouldn't cost them anything. And as Steve said, might actually save them a few dimes. So I think there is a way to find a balance in the interim that doesn't cost businesses more money than they really want to spend.
Well, in some instances, like not to like defend, I don't know which hotel you're referring to. We don't need to talk about which hotel, whichever one it is. But in some instances, so like I'll use our hotel as an example. All of our outdoor lighting is on 2 circuits that are linked to a single switch. So in order for us to say, hey, we don't want to have such and such lights on, we'll have to hire an electrician. Probably, I think Brian's probably 2 years out on his stuff. But we'd have to hire an electrician to come in and change the wiring to then separate out, okay, we only want just these interior hallways on or something like that. Otherwise, at this point, it's all or nothing for our lights. One switch does the whole thing. And I don't know what anybody else's wiring scheme is for any other hotel, but
That's a good point.
it could end up being not necessarily monumental to the level of changing every fixture, but it could still be a pretty significant expense with a long time frame behind it to make an adjustment like that.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is the answer everyone wants to hear, but it might just have to be as things, happen over time and getting the new step at a minimum, the new stuff. And as things change, again, not saying that that's the end all be all, but it might, have to take circumstances like that into consideration.
And maybe, and this just came to me, I haven't fully thought it through, but maybe a new light fixture is I hate to say it out loud, I don't like this, but it would be the way to address it, a permittable event. Where you just say you can't change a light unless it meets these standards. So no run into Home Depot to just buy whatever, we have to approve that light fixture. That's going to be contentious and I can't even I'd have to think about that, but that would be one way. Because these lights, especially at the beach, you get a light for 10 years down here, you've done really well.
So you get a light for
5 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
So I'm
They're turning over.
yeah.
You're right.
But I
Maybe
think,
that's the way to
but
address it.
not on its own. There still has to be a way. Okay, so let's use these 2 hotels, your hotel and one. I still think there should be a way to approach both properties and say, hey, your lights are in violation of our new or current code, and we understand, can you change them? And you would say, look, they're on 2 circuits, it would cost blah, blah, blah. We're working towards that, great. The other hotel might say, hey, you know what?
We have
Got a separate circuit, we could put a timer on there. So I think we shouldn't limit ourselves with just the replacement. We should try and fix things immediately if we can.
The replacement idea was more around the long game on it, not necessarily let's drive home right now, but ultimately make some time, 5-10 years, we are actually dark sky, but we won't get there in 2 years just because people will dig in and say, you can't make me do it. And they're right.
So,
Well, but we can't. I mean, even our current, based on our current code, there are people who are in violation of the code. So it doesn't matter. When codes change, you're not grandfathered into anything that was previous. So for instance, I don't know when the city decided that backflows had to be checked, but it doesn't matter how long you've had your house, backflows have to be checked. Do people do it? That's a whole other question. But if you have 6 lights outside and they're all unshielded and the looms are what they are, it doesn't matter if it was approved, doesn't matter when you built the house, you're in violation of our current code and it has to be fixed.
Well, but it's only fixed if someone lodges a complaint and enforcement actually does something.
Right. So instead of putting the burden on the citizens, I just wonder, and I say this with some trepidation, but would it be worth the time to ask our code officer to work a swing shift one time and just tour the city at night and see what's going on?
I would love that.
Daryl's already done it.
sure.
But I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know who would have to ask for that to happen, if it would
Good
be
idea.
us, if it would be Steve or,
Someone talking to the chief.
but I think that would at least give us an idea from somebody a little more objective, what the situation is really like and how many opportunities do we have to fix these bright skies and turn them maybe not completely dark, but at least maybe a shade or two darker.
I can kind of see a pathway coming here. We can get an idea of what the situation is, as you're just describing. We can figure out how to get some people in here to give us a little better understanding of how it's done well. I know for me, I can look at this conversation a little more completely, just understanding kind of some of the issues in town. I didn't before.
So real quick.
Yep, no, go ahead.
It's short. I know a guy. So I interviewed a gentleman that used to be one of the boards of directors on the International Dark Skies Association. He has since split ways and now operates a contract. He's a contractor that contracts with cities and places to help them become dark sky approved places, location cities, or whatever it is to improve their dark sky stuff. His name's John Ballantine. I can't remember what the name of his company is. I don't know if he would be willing to or able to zoom in, or I don't know where he lives, if he still lives down in Arizona, but to give us and or council a presentation about what it would take to take that next step from where we're at of wanting to be dark sky great and awesome and beautiful and all that stuff, and taking our next step and actually getting to that point. Because I think from my understanding, he has gone through that whole process to get the International Dark Sky seal of approval for organizations around the country.
With something like that, I think, again, what we're talking about here tonight, and everyone's got great ideas and everything to that extent. I think what we're trying to do is come up with some recommendations to the council. And these are the types of things that you're speaking of, because the council is going to have to make the decisions whether to talk to the chief, whether to hire a contractor, whether, what steps to take. So I think what the plan commission needs to think about as we're having these discussions, which are great, I'm not trying to, but I think we have to rein it in terms of making recommendations, because that's the task that's been assigned. And then I think once they have those recommendations, I don't see why the plan commission members couldn't continue to speak on behalf of what we're talking about. But in the end, it's going to be the council who's going to drive these things of hiring a contractor, taking these next steps, talking to the chief. So I think that just has to be in the back of everyone's mind.
It's a good point. We do have this process in motion right now with our code audit.
Right.
We have a professional who's going to do this stuff. We have to communicate what are the needs of the community? What does the community want in the city? And make those recommendations. And, we've hit on some of them here tonight. So I think maybe diving in a little deeper, maybe on tracking down some of these people that we're thinking could give us a little better idea of what's going on.
I've got to go.
You gotta go. It's not dark yet. Wait, you can go look at the dark skies.
Yeah.
Whether we have someone from the city or someone in the public side looking out there and going, hey, here's the types of violation. That would help us make some of those. I see it kind of brought up actually to the city council with the idea of these are the issues that don't work with what we have. And here are the things that people want to see.
And I thought it was interesting. I looked at the model lighting ordinance from the International Dark Sky Association. We actually have hit a lot of the points.
Oh, yeah.
So we actually have the language there. There's just a few tweaks. So really a lot of this ordinance is in pretty good shape. I don't think it's going to take a ton to just tighten up the spots we're talking about.
Yeah. And I've heard several times tonight enforcement. I think that's having that and making sure it's clear. And after that, having, making sure that the conversion is clear so people can understand why they're being asked to change what they're doing.
And making sure, and if there is enforcement action to be taken, that the officers know how the measurement device they have meets with our code and what that conversion is in that direction.
And this does refer to Lux at one point. So there's a conversion, it says,
Is there? I must have missed that page.
so it's our second page. It's E2. B2B, very last line, maximum vertical luminance on any surface does not exceed 0.3 foot candles or 3 lux. So there are obviously measures out there for how to get between these. We just have to look them up.
Yeah, it's not, I can't remember what the calculation is. It's not a complicated calculation,
it's
but
not.
but it is a calculation.
But it could be something that we could provide a table. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal.
And again, I mean, the code enforcement officer, it's not like he's doing lighting, so the more we can make
Exactly.
it easier for
Information.
everyone. Because the last thing we want to do is administer. We'd rather talk to people and, you know, have them just educated in a way that makes sense. And the more we can show things, you know, visually maybe even is more helpful. You know, reading this, sometimes it's like, oh man, what does this mean? But some pictures of shielded lights or what those might be the educational component on the website or something to try to, you know, put out there for people to try to better understand.
Yeah, I think that's pretty key.
Yeah, and I think putting an actual page on the city website.
Yeah.
That gives tons of information about the benefits, as well as hear what these terms mean. This is what it looks like at your front yard. This is, you know,
Thank you,
just some
Bill.
pictures, and it's like someone, you've got further than there. Go to our website. You'll find the information you need.
What if we tried to track someone down to come and talk to us about it? You think of
It
that?
sounds like I was thinking the city council should drive.
And I'm not saying, you know, I think if it was something that you still wanted to make the contact and see what the gentleman had to say, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do think that we should think of these types of things, and whether it's a memo or whether it's something that we can give to the council. Hey, here is basically the items that we've thought of that we think should be considered if we're going to move forward with that. It could be, you know, having someone like this tweaking it, you know, because there are some people that know this better than frankly us,
Mhm.
that, you know, are more experienced and understand it better. And so I just think that we come up with some type of memo or document or something to share with them. And then I think that they would take that information and make the decision as to what direction they'd like to go.
So maybe we come back next time and we each have kind of our little hit list of here's the things that I think are most important about what we've spoken about. Or what
I
we
mean, I think we could take the minutes from today's meeting,
just run with that.
Into a recommendation.
they can turn it into recommendations. I mean, it's not that complicated, you know?
I'm just so used to being more complicated. I got here an hour.
Easy one.
Yeah, let's uncomplicate all.
Yes.
work.
These are our recommendations, and list
Right.
them
I like
on what we think are the order of importance.
Right,
From
Yeah.
more global to more,
yeah.
Well, and
run with it.
And honestly, like you said, to actually meet the exact MLO that they have there is not that far. It's not a huge step from where we're at existing. It's
Right.
just, how does that work out in the actual real world? On paper, it's one thing. We have the whole code that says one specific thing that's really close, but then in practice, we're not as close as we look on paper.
Although a part of that, as we've mentioned, as we mentioned before, a lot of it has to do with enforcement, and the lack of enforcement is because most of us don't want to rat on our neighbors. I mean, it really comes down to that. And, you know, I've spoken to some of my neighbors, and some of them have been very gracious and some have been less so.
Yeah, we get that all the time.
So, you know, but I still am not gonna, I would feel really weird lodging a complaint, much as it really does bother me on so many levels. So
So give me their address. I'll lodge a complaint.
again.
I write lots of complaints.
Night, it will be.
Yep, me too. I'll do it.
stop by my house afterwards for drinks and there you go. There's 4 dogs, but other than that, you know. So should we work on the recommendations? Or is it something we should come back to?
Steve, does this feel like something in the planning department would want to?
Well, if you want, I could take a stab at something based on the conversation, send it out. You guys can comment back.
Yeah.
And do it that way.
I think
That'd
that's
be
a good idea.
wonderful.
Very efficient.
Okay.
And I won't reply to all, I promise, Robert.
Okay, any further? Consider that close. Any items for the good of the order?
I don't want to keep us here longer, but since we're kind of dealing with the housekeeping issue, maybe I'm going to throw out 2 more, and this probably isn't the appropriate time to even, or forum to talk about them, but if you all are willing to talk about them, I'm going to throw them out. So the first is parking generally, but specifically, I want to talk about restaurant seating in parking lots around Cannon Beach. I believe the council has extended it through COVID, a few times, several times. It was supposed to end, 6 or 8 months ago when COVID supposedly ended. And just kind of get people's thoughts on the end around parking rules when now parking lots are able to be turned into seating, and see what anyone thinks about that. And then the second issue I want to talk about is our speed bumps. And I know the city has traditionally been opposed to speed bumps, but living off of Ecola Park Road, I'm literally waiting. And I talked to the fire chief and police chief about this, literally waiting for someone to be run over. I see cars speeding daily, and there's a lot more pedestrians that are on Ecola Park Road. I don't know if there's an exception for Ecola Park Road or how that would look, but I feel like we have to be proactive whether it's a planning department or a city council to seriously consider speed bumps in a few high traffic areas around town. So again, I don't know if this is the appropriate forum or if anyone wants to talk about it, or if we all want to go home and enjoy the rest of the evening, that's fine. I'm already home, so I will leave it up to you.
I can comment real quick if you'd like.
Go ahead.
I believe that the council at their, maybe not the last, at a recent meeting, had discussed sunsetting the outdoor seating. So I think that was to take place. I don't know the specific date, but I know it was sometime in September. So I think there could be some impacts in terms of sunsetting that and potentially removing those types of things. I don't know everything at this point in time, Aaron, but that may be a way of trying to address that issue. As far as speed bumps, it might be one of those ones that you would definitely need to talk to the Public Works Department in terms of how that could be considered. I'm not saying that it's the right or wrong idea, but I don't believe that we have any ability from a planning department or plan commission to really address that. But you could maybe, whether it's talking to a counselor or to public works staff, that might be the place to go with that. In addition to, like you talked about, with fire and police.
And to follow up on Steve's comment, I believe Ecola Park Road may be under ODOT's jurisdiction. So they might have to be part of that conversation as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's interjurisdictional. Cannon Beach has up till about 8th Street, and then ODOT has it from there. So it would be. And I've looked at this before. I just wanted to get it in front of you all and see if you all, any of you had opinions on it too. Thank you for that, Steve.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron, this is Les. I just wanted to pass on that we had a very recent conversation with Public Works, and one of our recommendations was installation of a speed bump, and we were told that wasn't something that was done in the city. So we're hearing the same thing you have, I think.
Yeah, that's what I heard too, and that's just unacceptable. So I will start pushing from other angles. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know when they say it isn't done, what that means.
Right. It's the village, Mickey, and we're not changing the village. We're gonna put up our gates and we're gonna just keep doing what we've been doing since the village started.
So not to drive weirdly off onto a whole crazy tangent with speed bumps and stuff, but speed bumps don't have to be just a speed bump that's painted
Right.
yellow right in the middle of the road. There's tasteful and aesthetically pleasing ways to create speed bumps involving cobble and stuff like that, that you create a pedestrian walking path that's elevated 6 inches from the road. That's even with the curb. So pedestrians walk straight across, but it's a speed bump for a car as they go through the area. It's still fitting with the charm. Not that we need to go off on a crazy tangent about speed bumps and the good of the order.
You want to have something, Jen?
I just wanted to say, I did recently hear that Manzanita does have speed bumps of some sort. And I would think that might be something that somebody, maybe Aaron, could look into.
Aaron, did you hear that?
I did, and I have a note, and yes, I will look into that. Thank you, Jan.
Great.
So, and I just want to tell you that my experience is the same as yours and less. When I went to Public Works and asked them to consider either stop signs or speed bumps because of speeding employees leaving to go home, they were absolutely opposed to both. And my understanding was, if I understood the response correctly, it was because it's out of character with our city.
Yeah.
It's going to take somebody to be run over before something gets done, unfortunately, is what I feel is going to happen. Some kid is going to get run over on my street, and then the city will have to do something.
I'm not exactly, I'm not an engineer and don't quote me exactly on this, but I think oftentimes that what they do is they do certain studies and warrants as far as traffic and doing, not saying this is the right way, because oftentimes there's a lot of things that just simply don't warrant these types of things. And that's oftentimes the engineering studies that are provided to Public Works. I'm not trying to talk on their behalf, and I encourage people to do that. But oftentimes when you're looking at certain safety factors or crashes and things like that, there's a little bit of engineering that goes into that to study those intersections to see if there are certain warrants for certain improvements or safety factors to be done as a result of that study. So that may also be a part of those discussions.
Although I do think the city itself could just say, we value slow moving traffic.
Sure.
And then you don't have to have a study, because you're just saying, this is what we've decided to elevate as a value in our village. Our village is not going to have fast moving vehicles. We value pedestrians. I mean, that's the other way to approach it.
And
It's basically part of the village character as opposed to contrary to the village character.
Sure.
just like an artful lawyer, I love it. The Jason and Mark both had the thought of, in terms of fire safety, police presence, that it slows those guys down. And my response is like, I've never seen a high-speed chase in Cannon Beach. I mean, how fast do we really need to get there? Sure, if there's a real fire, okay, but I mean, we're talking 2 or 3 speed bumps maybe on Ecola Park Road in total. Is that really going to slow down their response time that much? And when they go into the park, it's invariably to save some tourist that's in 1.5 feet of water, 30 feet out into the ocean. And I'm not minimizing rescues, of course, because serious things do happen, but most of the time it ends up being a Coast Guard chopper that's dealing with it, not the fire truck that couldn't get there because of the speed bump. So, this will be fun. I'm probably gonna send some emails tonight. So more to come. Thanks for indulging me, everybody.
Robert, do we have the tree report?
I can bring that up real quick. So for July, so don't, wonder if we had a meeting in July or not.
Good enough.
We had 2 dead trees. Both of which had required replantings. Moving into August, we have 2 being removed for construction. That's an expansion of an existing house. We had 2 dead trees at the conference center. And we had 2 hazard trees over on Elliott Avenue.
Okay,
And that's what we have to current.
great. Thank you. I think we might have done it, or well, pretty close to an hour. That's amazing.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody. We'll adjourn this meeting.